The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. Big news in Georgia last night with the Democrat coming in first in the vote count in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. We're going to ask Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia what he makes of that one. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about that.
Probably feels pretty good about it, Lawrence, but I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
I think he should. We'll get to it. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you. They are going to lie. They had already proven that to us before Donald Trump decided to start the most expensive war in American history. They're going to lie. They're going to lie about how much it cost. They're going to lie about everything about it. That's what they do. They lie the way Donald Trump has taught them to lie. They have proved they are willing to lie about anything as long as they can lie about it. They know, in many cases, the truth will come out and expose some of their lies. Kristi Noem knows now that her lies about Renee Good and Alex Preddy being domestic terrorists in Minneapolis who deserve to be murdered by Donald Trump's invasion forces eventually collapsed under the weight of the truth, the video recorded truth. And when their lies collapse, they will pretend they never lied. And in Donald Trump's deeply perverse case, as we have known from the start about him, he will simply never stop lying. A reporter trying to catch Donald Trump in a lie to his face will simply be handed another lie by Donald Trump, as we saw him do today, about the war he decided to start, which in its first 12 days has cost more than $11.3 billion. A reporter trying to catch Donald Trump in a contradiction to his face will simply get a Trump riddle in reply, like this. Today, a White House reporter said to Donald Trump, "You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?" To which Donald Trump said, "Well, it's both. It's both." Ask a clown a question and you will get a clown's answer. No other president has ever been asked that question, because no other president has ever referred to starting a war as a little excursion, which Donald Trump has now done repeatedly and did again today, thereby insulting the sacrifice of the 7 soldiers killed in his war and the 140 wounded, which new reports now reveal include injuries much more serious than Donald Trump's Defense Department ever wanted to admit, including 1 possible amputation, other traumatic brain injuries, and 25 now hospitalized with serious injuries in Germany, according to CBS. Reporters had to dig out what we now know about those injuries from the department run by the only defense secretary in history who had to promise to stop drinking in order to win his Senate confirmation from a Republican-controlled Senate. That is the same defense secretary who said in the first days of Donald Trump's war that news reporting about the American deaths in Donald Trump's war was intended to, quote, make the president look bad. Those were his words. Make the president look bad. That's what he was worried about. And if you think it is impossible to be more vain than Donald Trump, meet Pete Hegseth, who ordered news photographers banned from the Pentagon because of what he considered unflattering photographs of him during his recent rare appearance in the press briefing room, talking about Donald Trump's war. Imagine how deeply perverse you have to be to ban news photographers from the Pentagon because of this photograph. Washington Post reports the Defense Department has barred press photographers from briefings on the ongoing U.S.-Israeli military conflict with Iran after they published photos of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that his staff deemed unflattering, according to 2 people familiar with the decision who spoke on the condition of anonymity out of fear of retaliation. Imagine living in fear inside the Pentagon because the only man in the building who promised not to drink in order to get his job doesn't like the way he is photographed. There has never been a smaller mind employed in the Pentagon than Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense, who pretends he's a Secretary of War and now lives in fear of photographers. Donald Trump is surrounded by small minds in a way no president before him has ever been. That is Donald Trump's design. Donald Trump's first-term cabinet could not possibly ever reach the stupidity levels that Donald Trump's current cabinet and staff reach on a daily basis. Stupid is an accurate but woefully inadequate word to describe the Trump team's approach to Donald Trump's war. New reporting by the New York Times indicates there is even more proof that from the start, they have had no idea what they're doing and no ability to anticipate the most obvious results of launching such a war, including blocking 20% of the world's oil supply from moving through the Strait of Hormuz, thereby sending the world's oil price skyrocketing along with the price of gasoline in the United States. The New York Times reports Donald Trump and his sycophantic incompetence couldn't see that one coming. The Times reports on February 18th, as President Trump weighed whether to launch military attacks on Iran, Chris Wright, the energy secretary, told an interviewer he was not concerned that the looming war might disrupt oil supplies in the Middle East and wreak havoc in energy markets. Some of Mr. Trump's other advisors shared similar views in private, dismissing warnings that the second time around, Iran might wage economic warfare by closing shipping lanes carrying roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. The episode is emblematic of how much Mr. Trump and his advisors misjudged how Iran would respond to a conflict that the government in Tehran sees as an existential threat. After Donald Trump said that Iran would have to choose a leader acceptable to him, Iran chose a new leader who is the son of the previous leader and possibly even more hardline than his Ayatollah father. Donald Trump lied about that today, saying, quote, "They have a new leader every 3 weeks, every 3 days." That's one of those lies where Donald Trump becomes instantly dissatisfied with the lie that he has told and then exaggerates it into a worse lie. He hears himself say 3 weeks and decides to change it to 3 days. The last Iranian leader lasted 37 years. His son, who's now 56 years old, is on his way to a 30-year run if he dies at age 86 like his father did. But Iran's first Ayatollah died at age 89. So the number 3 is relevant here, but it's not 3 weeks or 3 years. We have now had exactly and only 3 Ayatollahs running Iran over 47 years. A new report by Reuters tonight says Donald Trump's own intelligence agencies has assessed there has been no real effective change in the leadership of Iran. The most famous object ever to take its place on the Oval Office desk was made in a federal prison in Oklahoma for the President of the United States, Harry Truman. A U.S. Marshal had it made and delivered to the President. It was a walnut base, 13 inches wide, with a painted glass sign that said, "The buck stops here." Harry Truman lived those words in the presidency and never tried to evade responsibility for his decisions or the decisions of his subordinates. In an address to the National War College in 1952, President Truman said, "When the decision is up before you, and on my desk I have a motto which says the buck stops here, the decision has to be made. That decision may be right, it may be wrong. If it is wrong, and it has been shown that it is wrong, I have no desire to cover it up. I admit it and try to make another decision that will meet the situation. And that is what any president of the United States has to do." Donald Trump doesn't see it that way. And he proved that again today in the most vile possible way with another ugly Trump lie. In his final address to the nation from the Oval Office, Harry Truman said, The president, whoever he is, has to decide. He can't pass the buck to anybody. No one else can do the deciding for him. That's his job. And in that final address to the nation, President Truman said this.
There is no job like it on the face of the earth. In the power which is concentrated here at this desk, and in the responsibility and difficulty of the decisions. I want all of you to realize how big a job, how hard a job it is, not for my sake, because I'm stepping out of it, but for the sake of my successor. He needs the understanding help of every citizen.
Harry Truman would be sickened by what his successor did today when Donald Trump lied about what we now know was an American Tomahawk missile targeted at a girls' school in Iran. A U.S. official familiar with the matter told MS Now that a preliminary investigation by the Pentagon has found that U.S. forces bombed a school in Iran due to dated targeting information that identified the building as part of an adjacent military complex. So that's the government's own preliminary investigation, confirming what the New York Times has been reporting for days, which the Trump team was claiming was some kind of harassment of the White House. That is what Donald Trump's press secretary called New York Times accurate reporting about the American missile attack on that girls' school. Harassment, that was her word for it. Today, the New York Times reports a visual investigation by the Times showed the building housing the school had been fenced off from the military base between 2013 and 2016. 3 public entrances were open to the school. Ground was cleared, and play areas, including a sports field, were painted on asphalt, and walls were painted blue and pink. So the outdated targeting information that Donald Trump's team of incompetence was using that attacked that school was at least 10 years old. And now 175 people, most of them children, are dead. First, Donald Trump lied, as he always does. He first attempted to blame Iran, saying Iran could somehow obtain and operate an American Tomahawk missile, which is, of course, a complete screaming lie that Donald Trump only tried once. And the next day, Donald Trump said there's an investigation going on, so he wasn't going to talk about it. And then Today, he reached a new low in Trump lying when he tried to claim he didn't know about the attack. He didn't know about the dead children. He actually said the words, "I don't know about it." And so during Donald Trump's lifetime, we have watched the presidency go from the buck stops here to "I don't know about it." Please keep Harry Truman in mind. And imagine him watching Donald Trump respond today to the question, as Commander-in-Chief, do you take responsibility for that?
A new report says that the military investigation has found that the United States struck the school in Iran. As Commander-in-Chief, do you take responsibility for that?
That is what?
As Commander-in-Chief, do you...
For what?
For the strike on the school in Iran. A new report says the military investigation has found it was the United States that struck the school.
I don't know about it.
I don't know about it. And then he wandered off in search of another question. And of course, the next White House reporter changed the subject for him, as he knew that would happen. And he is lying. Of course he's lying. This time he's lying about the deaths of girls in Iran, brave enough to try to get an education, the girls who could be the future for the kind of Iranian society we would all like to see. Some of those girls might have helped lead Iran into that future. And Donald Trump, once again, disgraces the American presidency, this time by saying, "I don't know about it," when he is asked about the death of those girls killed by an American Tomahawk missile. Donald Trump doesn't know about a lot of things. Donald Trump doesn't know most things that he needs to know and should know, but Donald Trump knows. Those girls were killed by one of his Tomahawk missiles. And he knows those girls would be alive today if he did not decide to start his war in Iran. The war that he called today a little excursion. In a little excursion, girls don't get killed in their classrooms. In a little excursion, soldiers don't face amputation. In a little excursion, soldiers don't have brain damage. In a little excursion, soldiers are not killed. Donald Trump's war is what killed those girls. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congressman Adam Smith of Washington. He is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, I want to go straight to, especially as a West Coast representative, I'm sure you got calls from the West Coast today when Donald Trump's FBI tried to make it known that the West Coast needs to worry about a missile attack launched from Iran. What can you tell your constituents and America about that tonight?
Well, I mean, one of the fundamental questions is, are Americans safer because of Donald Trump's war? And the answer to that question is no, for a whole bunch of different reasons. But this report from the FBI underscores it. As you pointed out in your monologue, Iran views this as an existential threat because it is. Donald Trump has said he wants to take out the regime. And so they are lashing out, certainly across the Middle East, but elsewhere. And they have various terrorist cells and proxies. And we have to be, ready for that, which of course Trump and his administration is not. I don't have specific reporting on the details of this. I'm getting a classified call tomorrow. But Americans everywhere have to be ready for the fact that Donald Trump has plunged us into a war that is expanding on a daily basis.
There's been a lot of reporting today saying that this FBI theory of a drone attack on the West Coast is technologically impossible for Iran. What is your understanding of that?
Yeah, I don't know, to be perfectly honest with that. I will say that I don't have an enormous amount of confidence in Donald Trump's FBI, as has also been widely reported. They've recently fired some of their primary Iranian experts because they dared to be part of the investigation into Donald Trump. So the incompetence problem that you pointed out is deep in the administration. That's part of the problem in being prepared for this. I need to get more details on what's possible, what Iran might have. But the bottom line is we're at risk, and I really want to emphasize one other point. The biggest thing that all of us policymakers and everyone in the country needs to be focused on is stopping this war. It was a terrible idea. It has gone horribly, but we need to get it stopped as soon as possible because it's only going to get worse day by day in terms of the negative impacts. And we're not going to be able to achieve the various different goals that President Trump and others advocating this war have been trying to achieve. It needs to stop now.
What is it like really trying to find out how much a war like this actually costs?
Yeah, it's normally difficult, but it's particularly impossible because the Trump administration is not transparent. They do not share the information with Congress that they're supposed to share. We've been trying to get the cost of the boat strikes going on in Latin America and the operation in Venezuela, and that started in September, and they still haven't provided any information on that. But I think the estimates that it's costing between $1 and $2 billion a day are pretty accurate. Now, keep in mind, that's just the cost to the U.S. Treasury. The cost to the economy, our economy, the global economy, is even far greater than that.
And as we go forward, what are the kinds of ways that Congress might be able to get control of these costs?
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to press them as hard as we can, press for the information, and we will do that. It would help enormously if I was chairman of the committee instead of ranking member. That gives us subpoena power, a lot more ability, and I would think that if we win, hopefully, we get back in the majority, we're going to have to do that. Because even information that the Republican majority is asking for on different issues isn't being provided. We are going to have to press them, and I think we're going to have to use legal process to get after that information.
What is happening to American weapon stock?
They're going down rather significantly. I mean, we already had a problem in terms of munitions. We haven't updated the manufacturing of them so that they're manufactured more quickly. Then we had the conflict in Ukraine. Israel's various wars we've helped out. We were already in a bad spot. We also had the war against Yemen, which a lot of people have forgotten, but we spent 3.5 months bombing the hell out of Yemen last year as well. So yeah, we're getting pretty low. They have not yet given us the numbers. Again, another aspect of the complete lack of transparency. Two big things they haven't given us. They haven't given us the numbers on what weapons we have left. Also, even as every day they claim that they are meeting their objectives, they have not given us what exactly those objectives are and what exactly they've destroyed to date. So we're going to keep pressing, but the lack of transparency now is a huge problem.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, as we reported last night, there was no good news for Donald Trump in Tuesday's special election in Georgia, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's very Republican congressional district, with the Democrat coming out on top in that primary election. Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff joins us next. Last night, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's former congressional district in Georgia, a Democrat won. That's right, the top vote getter in last night's election in that very conservative, Trump-supporting district in Georgia was Democrat retired Brigadier General Sean Harris. General Harris will face Trump-endorsed Republican Clay Fuller in a special runoff election on April 7th to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress. In other good news for Democrats in Georgia, our next guest, Senator Jon Ossoff, is leading in a new poll that shows Senator Ossoff at least 9 points ahead of all the potential Republican candidates included in that poll. Donald Trump went to Kentucky today to try to convince people that he has delivered on his promise of lower prices, even though gas prices are now skyrocketing and inflation has increased because of Donald Trump's unconstitutional and illegal tariffs. The Trump staff actually put a sign on the stage with the words "lower prices" in front of an audience full of people who paid higher prices for gas to get to that event today. MS Now's Will McDuffie spoke to voters in Pennsylvania about the price of gas.
Around about 45, 50 cents more today than last week, almost 5 days ago.
That's a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's a lot. If it keeps going, it's not gonna be good.
As for right now, I'm less than a quarter of a tank, so it's between getting gas or going to the grocery store to get food for my kids.
I actually stopped driving because gas prices have gone so high. I can't even afford to really go to work, so I've resulted in taking the bus now.
Joining us now is Senator Jon Ossoff, Democrat of Georgia. He's a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Senate Appropriations Committee, and the Rules Committee, running for re-election this year. Senator Ossoff, what do you make of those results last night in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district with the Democrat coming out on top?
Lawrence, thanks for having me. And first of all, I want to tip my cap to General Harris and his team for the campaign they're running. And it just speaks to the intensity of mobilization and opposition and outrage that's directed at this administration, and not just among Democrats, among independents, and increasingly in Georgia among Republicans, who privately and more publicly are speaking out against this administration, its failure, its corruption, the chaos that it's sowing across the country and around the world. And look, Georgia is the front line. Georgia is the most crucial battleground state in the country. And you know, this result last night shows the momentum that we've built, but some of the recent polling, you know, you put some up on the screen, I gotta correct that. One of my opponents, a congressman from coastal Georgia, he's just 3 points behind me. This will be, despite the incredible momentum we're building, the tightest, hardest fought U.S. Senate race in the country this year. And I'm asking folks to take action right now and help me at electjon.com, electjon.com.
The Marjorie Taylor Greene started this defection from Donald Trump in her district. I mean, she was the first Trump voter in her district to defect from him. But obviously in those results last night, Donald Trump has a problem in that district now.
Donald Trump has a problem with every side of his coalition. You know, you got folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are longtime MAGA devotees, furious at all the promises that the president made to MAGA, but his administration has broken. And then you got folks just across the state. These are middle of the road folks who tend to vote Republican, sometimes local Republican elected officials who just can't stand the incompetence, the abuses of power, the grotesque corruption. They see this guy and his family raking in billions of dollars from all over the world while the cost of living crisis in America gets worse and worse. And it's infuriating people, and not just Democrats.
So in the polling, we're seeing that Donald Trump's new war has the lowest support in history of any war in its beginning days. And polling in all war, the support for it declines over time. So it is very likely going down from here. And along with that, there's a massive number, over 2/3 of voters, who say they expect gas prices to continue to go up because of Donald Trump's war.
Look, the thing to remember as well, first of all, energy prices cascade through everything in the economy. Here's another angle. You know, Georgia's #1 industry is agriculture. I was on the phone this morning with a cotton grower in Georgia. About 1/3 of the international trade in fertilizer goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And we're coming up on the planting season. So farmers in Georgia and across the country are seeing fertilizer prices now going through the roof, diesel prices now going through the roof. Farmers are already getting hammered in the trade war. The rest of the world is retaliating against American farmers for all of Donald Trump's tariffs. And so this spells potentially very tough times in the weeks and months ahead for American agriculture, which is also going to directly impact food prices.
So Donald Trump actually had this sign on the stage today saying lower prices. I mean, does he think that people don't see the signs on their gas pumps of what those prices are?
I think the president appears increasingly to have lost touch with reality. And that is deeply concerning when you have a White House in which he is surrounded by yes men and yes women who cater to his every need, a cabinet much more concerned with winning his favor than giving him good advice or executing their jobs competently, and the nation now plunged into war. It is a deeply dangerous moment for the country. It speaks to the necessity of winning these midterm elections in a landslide and restoring checks and balances and sanity and competence to the governance of the United States. And so again, I'm asking folks to help at electjohn.com. The Senate race matters. These midterm elections matter. There is an awful lot at stake for our country.
Senator Jon Ossoff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
And coming up, the Jeffrey Epstein investigation spearheaded by our next guest, Congressman Ro Khanna, on the House Oversight Committee, deposed a very important witness today, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime accountant. Congressman Khanna will join us next. He was in the room today. There is a new statue in Washington that Donald Trump's staff have surely not told him about, even though he appears to love statues. It's on the National Mall, and it is the Donald Trump holding Jeffrey Epstein like Jack and Rose in the movie Titanic. The plaque on the statue says, "The tragic love story between Jack and Rose was built on luxurious travel, raucous parties, and secret nude sketches. This monument honors the bond between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, a friendship seemingly built on luxurious travel, raucous parties, and secret nude sketches." There it is. Today, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime accountant, Richard Kahn, testified to the House Oversight Committee. Richard Kahn, who is also a co-trustee and beneficiary of the Jeffrey Epstein estate, told the committee that he did not know Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking and sexually abusing young girls.
He confirmed there were 5 clients that paid money to Epstein, and that was Les Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Stephen Sinofsky, the Rothschilds, and Leon Black. We've already deposed Wexner, and we're going to be deposing Leon Black very soon.
Following today's deposition, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, Robert Garcia, released a statement saying, in part, during his deposition, Khan made some important admissions. He helped facilitate a fake marriage between 2 women connected to Epstein, admitted to impersonating Epstein in communication with banks, and confirmed Epstein spoke about Donald Trump a lot. It's not credible that he had no knowledge of Epstein's activities, and his testimony today only raises more questions. As executor of Jeffrey Epstein's estate, Richard Kahn oversaw the administration and liquidation of Jeffrey Epstein's assets, including the 2023 sale of Jeffrey Epstein's massive ranch in New Mexico, a property where several Epstein survivors have said sex trafficking activity occurred. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee, and he was in today's deposition. Congressman Khanna, what did we learn today?
Well, first we learned that Les Wexner and Leon Black allegedly had huge financial ties with Epstein. Now, look, Leon Black still has buildings named after him at Dartmouth. Both of these men need to be held accountable. And we also got the names of Rothschilds and 2 other powerful individuals who Comer is going to call. I directly asked Khan whether the woman who has accused Donald Trump of rape when she was 13, whether she was paid a settlement by the Epstein estate. And he first said yes, she was. And I was very clear what I was asking. 4 hours later, he backtracked and said, no, he was talking about another woman. So we also need clarification on why he changed his testimony. And I'm looking forward to that transcript coming out.
He's the kind of person that any real investigation of Jeffrey Epstein would have included. Of course, if you're doing a real investigation of Jeffrey Epstein at the FBI, you go to the accountant.
Well, Lawrence, I mean, you know, we've talked about this before. The only reason that we wrote to the Epstein estate was because of your show. You did more work and your team to investigate this matter than the FBI or the Justice Department has. That's not hyperbole, that is fact, because you had Bradley Edwards on, and he said, well, why don't you go and subpoena the Epstein estate, which we did. And I thought it was such an obvious suggestion. I said, surely the FBI or the Justice Department would have done that. They have not. They have not investigated him. They have not investigated Les Wexner, Leon Black. I mean, it has been just a total abandonment of the survivors.
When he talked about Epstein's income from these people, that these people helped fund Jeffrey Epstein's lifestyle, for what? Why were they giving him money?
He was unable to answer that question. I mean, he said, well, they were financial planning advice. These are the richest people in the United States, if not the world. You could get KPMG. You can get PwC. Rich billionaires like to keep their money. They are not going to hire someone just to plan who does not have the credential or the planning. And so the question is, why were they paying him off? And Senator Wyden has done incredible work in the Senate going after the financial transactions. There's the story of all the young girls who were abused. That's front and center. But there are also the financial crimes, and we need far more investigation on that.
And did Khan prepare the Epstein tax returns?
He did. He was not clear about that. He said that he was involved in the financial planning. I don't think he sat there himself and prepared it from the testimony, but he was certainly involved, and he admitted being involved in the financial planning, and so would work with the accountants of those tax returns.
What leads did the committee take out of this deposition?
The leads were, first, we need to clarify whether the settlement was actually paid to the person who accused Donald Trump of rape. Second, the 5 people who need to be deposed, Leon Black, Les Wexner, the Rothschilds, and the 2 others in terms of the financial matters. Third, even Khan testified that over 100 women were abused. And he said that many of them, in their settlements with the estate, explicitly had carve-outs for other men, meaning that other people other than Epstein and Maxwell abused them. We need to figure out what those carve-outs were and who those men were, because that will give us some evidence of what is being hidden in the Epstein files.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Andrew Weissmann will join us next. Former federal prosecutor Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is telling Donald Trump's Attorney General and FBI Director to preserve their records, which is prosecutor speak for "we are going to investigate you." Senator Whitehouse told the Attorney General, quote, "DOJ has not produced to Congress all records related to Jeffrey Epstein as the Act requires, including documents related to sexual assault allegations made against President Trump in 2019. Please preserve any existing and future records, documents, and materials related to DOJ's compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act with respect to the sexual assault allegations referenced above, including any materials related to DOJ's decision to withhold these records. As you know, federal law, including the Federal Records Act, imposes an obligation to preserve federal records on all DOJ employees, including FBI employees, and makes violations subject to criminal prosecution." Joining us now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel and an MS Now legal analyst. He is also the co-host of the podcast Main Justice. And Andrew, I want to pick up on a point that Congressman Khanna was just telling us about in the deposition today of Mr. Khan, Jeffrey Epstein's accountant. What do you think, as a prosecutor, you would be looking for from the accountant?
Well, there are lots of things to look for from an accountant. Obviously, tracing money and getting his explanations. But if he is saying that, yes, I can tell you where various transactions went, but I don't know really what they were for. In other words, I know money went from A to B, but I never heard what the purpose was. That's where, as an investigator, there's just so much to look at. One, there are lots and lots of staff that worked for Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, the accountant said that. All of those sort of so-called underlings are almost the first people that, as an investigator, you talk to. So if this was really a congressional committee to get at the truth, before you put the accountant and the Lex Wexner people before the committee, you want to interview all of those lower level people to find out what exactly they knew, what were they doing, where were people, for instance, was there a video recording sort of setup, which has been sort of widely reported. You want to know all of that. You also want to then have the FBI agents and the prosecutors, such as Maureen Comey, who you fired from the Department of Justice. You want her to come in so that you have an idea of what have they done already, but also, as you've been talking about, what have they not done, so you're not sort of retreading ground that they may have done, and then also find out what they haven't done so you know what you need to do. So there are just so many things here that, as somebody who's done investigations, I'm like, this is so obviously not a serious investigation where you're trying to get at the truth.
When you look at Senator Whitehouse's demand to preserve records at the Justice Department, there seems to be there's two possibilities there for him, which is that if the Democrats win the Senate, he would have subpoena power on the Judiciary Committee at that point to demand turning over things that they can't get now in the minority. But it also seems to anticipate the next Democratic Attorney General and Democratic presidentially appointed U.S. attorneys who could be prosecuting people at the Trump Justice Department for their violations of this new law, the Epstein Transparency Act, as well as possible federal records violations.
Absolutely. That's the way I read that as well. They're putting people at the Department of Justice on notice so they later can't say, you know, I wasn't aware that these documents were going to be needed for some potential investigation. It is worth remembering that if the House flips, they too will have subpoena power. They also will have the ability to go to court because they will be able to vote and say that we as a body want to go to court to enforce the Transparency Act, which is widely viewed, and I share that view, that it is being violated each and every day. In fact, the Department of Justice has admitted that they have not turned everything over, but that's what the statute actually calls for.
Yeah, and so given the confines of how they're working now, Democrats in the minority in the House, with the committee that the Democrats in that committee are doing their best under the circumstances since they don't control the witness list. What do you think can be accomplished now this year?
Well, this year could include the House flipping. Obviously, they wouldn't have, as you know, they wouldn't have all of the people in place until next year. But I think what they really need to do is either try and get things voluntarily, or they can just try and put more pressure on their Republican colleagues. Remember, they did get the Epstein Transparency Act passed. And so if they come up with a list of people, for instance, who they really think need to be interviewed, they could really be very public about why are you not doing this? We just saw a very performative example of that, where they called in both the former President Clinton and the Secretary of State, but you don't see them calling in the current president, who had substantial contact with Epstein. Again, I'm not saying that should happen now. I think there's a lot of legwork that I would do if I were actually investigating what happened here. Was there a thorough investigation, and who knew what was going on? There's just so much to look at that has been left on the table.
Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back. Andrew Weissmann gets tonight's last word.